Use the all. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Needham Historical Commission. This is our first in-person meeting that is also Zoom. So we have an audience in the select board chambers and an audience on Zoom. I'm Rose Doherty, this year's chair of the Needham Historical Commission. And what I'm going to do is ask the commission members to introduce themselves, starting with Dylan.
I am Dylan Attia. I'm the secretary for the commission.
I'm Laura Dorfman. I'm the vice chair.
Gloria Grice.
Don Lankowitz. Jeffrey Heller.
Okay, thank you. Now, Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, which you all know very well, suspended the open meeting laws, which allows us to have members of the public on Zoom. And this suspension has been extended to July 15th of this year. So this meeting features and welcomes public comment. Please note for the people on Zoom that the meeting is being recorded. Therefore, you should silence your electronic devices. And I will do that also because I realized I still have mine on. Silence your electronic devices. And for those folks who are on Zoom, please do not screen share your computer because the recording is a public document and anything that you broadcast may be captured in the recording. So I'm going to introduce each item on the agenda and invite the applicant to speak and then ask the public to speak. First, those who are here and then people on Zoom. For any response, I'm going to just ask that you, although we are in an informal situation this time because we are face-to-face, that you wait until I have yielded the floor to you. And please state your name and address before speaking. So I'm going to begin now with a very brief history of the Needham Historical Commission and the process that we follow according to Needham Bylaw 2.11.5. The Historical Commission was established in 1976, and the general bylaws of the Commonwealth charge us with listing Needham's historic assets on an official inventory. That inventory, now available on the town's website, has almost 200 structures and sites. The criteria for listing a property are straightforward. Properties that have one or more of the following characteristics: architectural significance, association with a person who is important to Needham's history, the site of an important event in Needham, and contribution to Needham's quality of life. This building in which we are sitting is obviously fits all four criteria. And now, following bylaw 2.11.5, the commission is charged with following a specific process when an owner applies for a demolition permit for a house on the inventory. First, the Historical Commission holds a meeting to determine whether or not the building is historically significant. Second, if that is so, a public meeting is held within 45 days to determine whether to impose a 6-month moratorium on the permit. Neighbors and abutters are notified of that meeting in case they want to offer an opinion. And that's the meeting that we're having today. The purpose of the delay, if imposed, is to allow time for consideration of preservation alternatives to demolition. So we have gathered tonight to hear from 2 applicants and the public about buildings that are on the inventory and that have pending demolition permits. Both buildings have been deemed historically significant by the commission. We're going to consider the structures separately. The owners will present their views and then the public will present their views and ask questions. We will then discuss and vote. And we are going to start with 28 Wyoming Avenue. So in that case, Mr. Vadim Kite can come and speak. I need to ask a technical question. Can he speak from there or should he come up to
He can absolutely come up to the chair.
It's up to you, because I feel like I'm gonna address the Supreme Court.
Well, I thank you for all your votes.
It would improve the audio quality the closer you are to the camera microphone set up in front.
Okay, and then in terms of the, like, the slides, we can't see them here.
Yes, unfortunately,
So how do I do that? How do I display the?
Can we print them out?
we can, if you would like me to print these to the members.
I'm gonna provide some
Um,
color to the
Yes,
situation.
yeah, I'm sure if you're willing to.
I have some too.
I mean, I could show them on my laptop, but I don't think that's gonna like.
No, it's fine. Do you happen to have the copy of the slides right in front of you there, or?
No, these are my weird notes.
Madam Chair, if you'd be willing to entertain a brief recess or brief delay while.
I think a brief delay is very much in order, and I would like to point out that the technology will always let us down.
I think we'll be. You're still recording, this is still a public.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Are there any questions about the process itself? It's pretty straightforward.
But Rose, does that mean that they can't see the,
They
can
will-
people here still see?
People can hear.
No, they can see and
Wrong.
hear.
We can't see them.
Miss Darge,
Yes,
we're ready if you want us to.
go forward if that.
And we don't have slides.
oh, that would be very fine. Then let us do that. We'll go ahead with 284 Webster Street.
It won't be so imposing this way.
It's against them.
Okay, so I'm Bob Smart, Needham attorney, used to be on the planning board, been off for a number of years now. This is Jillian Gerdos, who is a Temple member, and she's been involved with some of the Temple's projects over the years. And this is David Siebert, who has his own architectural firm, and he's done architectural work over the years for Temple Beth Shalom. So we're here to ask that you not determine that the property in question should be preferentially preserved. And, there are a few reasons for that. We appreciate the fact that this is a Kingsbury house, and there aren't that many of them left in the town. But the temple, unlike most of the religious institutions in town, has been growing substantially. It did a major renovation back in 2015. And since then, the temple has grown by what, 20, at least I would say 20% or so in terms of membership.
Mhm.
And things are tight. Now, the last couple of years haven't been representative, obviously, because of COVID. But there are a number of times when the temple parking is simply not adequate for its activities, particularly, high holy days, somebody has died and there's a particular event. It would really be helpful to the temple to have additional parking. Right now it has 88 parking spaces, and this would potentially increase it by, I think, 20, 23 or 24. We're waiting for the detailed plans on that. And they'll be located very close to the entry to the temple, so they'd be quite useful. The house itself has had some significant changes over the years. Some work has been done on the exterior. It's currently vinyl siding, and Dave Siebert can speak a little bit to kind of its architectural, visual, architectural and historical qualities. It's unfortunate that that it needs to come down, but the reality is, the temple is going to take it down, and we would ask that you not, impose the 6-month demolition delay, because there's really not any reasonable prospect that these structures are going to be saved. So that's basically my presentation. I'll turn it over to Dave.
Okay, thank you.
I'm David Siebert from BK Architects in Brockton, Mass. Before you is a few very fresh photos from today, and I know everybody's probably familiar with the house. It's at a prominent corner, but it's a very simple, basic federal setup that faces probably the intersection of paths back when one of was built, but it's obviously been added to and from over the years in many different ways. There's no real evidence of any particular historic or original detailing left. I do notice there may be a window left at the former front entrance, which is no longer used as an entry. It's a two-family apartment building at the moment with a few additions that really turn that into a possibility, and a single garage in the back. So as Bob mentioned, it's vinyl siding at the moment, all replacement vinyl windows, some aluminum trim. Our plastic shutters screwed to the siding, and an asphalt roof. I know from neighbor across the street that it's undergone several color changes over the years. I would imagine the siding as well.
Do you have any interior photos?
I don't, but it's the first, it's been broken up into 2 units. And it's very confusing how it's sort of broken up with some stairways and whatnot, but they're sort of 2 levels side by side. And there are several different floor levels on the first and second floor. There's a little bit of have a trail of hallways that get you to some of the sleeping rooms. But it is a little confusing. I know we had some plans of it submitted.
I'm just wondering if there's anything inside that's of any kind of historical significance.
Yeah, I don't even think the fireplace was original. I mean, judging from the brick from the exterior,
Mhm.
it certainly is. I
I
mean,
will pipe in and say, I learned from one of the neighbors who's here that there was a fire recently. So a lot of it was, that's why I think why they had to do a major renovation recently before selling.
So I guess one other thing I wanted to mention, I put this in a letter previously, but I think it possibly bears repeating, and that is that, you know, the Kingsbury legacy in Needham is clearly not going away. Mo Handel's house on the corner of, right off of Webster Street, you know, has a pretty prominent plaque. That's a Kingsbury house. You've obviously got the house on Glendew Road. There's a Kingsbury Street that I travel on, as Jeff does quite often, on the way to the Needham Tennis Club. And, you know, so.
I own another Kingsbury house.
Is that right?
The one on Great Plain and Noy Street.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
So as a board, I'm on the Temple board. I'm a Temple member. And I really appreciate your dedication to the town, for real. I'm sure it's a labor of love. And I told you at our first meeting that I hate personally to see anything taken down. And but this particular instance, this house is in a place that allows our Temple really to be really good neighbors. It's not got, it's not charming. It's not got almost anything left, whether by fire or renovation. And it, you know, even the fence itself is somewhat of an obstruction. And so we really do, we are dedicated to this community. We appreciate and do not take for granted the community here that's allowed us to thrive. All Needhamites have been good to our Temple, and we really just want to be good back to them and get as many cars on a regular basis off the street. Obviously, there's holidays and events that, you know, as with any place of worship around town, Eaton's and everything else, but on the regular daily, getting those 20 to 24 or 25, cars off the street is significant. That's staff,
Okay. Are there any questions from the commissioners?
Well, you were gonna get public comment first, right? And then-
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Would you like to come up and read your letter? Because
This was totally unsolicited. I happened to see a notice, thank you. I happened to see a notice in Hometown Weekly, a public notice, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I had none.
Would you mind just introducing
Oh,
yourself?
I'm
So I'm
terribly
taking
sorry.
notes. So
Jean Higgins,
Yep.
293 Webster Street, and I live diagonally across the street
thank
from
you
this
very
house.
much.
So when I saw the notice, I thought, oh, that's interesting, because I've actually been in the house. And my aunt and uncle owned 250-year-old homes in Reading. And so I'm used to what the architecture should look like of an older home. And I've been in that house. I was shocked to find out it was a historical house, because there's like nothing historical inside the house. And I was friends with the people who sold it to the temple. And probably, I don't know, somewhere around 5 or 6 years ago, the house caught on fire. And it was like a year before the Butterfields were able to move back in there again. And so there were like major renovations, and I had been in there before the fire. So I can only imagine what it's like after the fire. So when I read that, I mean, we've had some difficulties with parking and traffic and stuff during the years, and we've lived across the street for 32 years. And the temple has always been so cooperative in helping us with the Needham police and directing traffic and stuff. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go to bat for the temple, because, I know that you guys normally would protect the interests of an older home. So I wrote this email to you folks and to share it with the people who may be listening on Zoom. My husband and I have lived diagonally across from the subject house for 32 years. During that time, many renovations have been made to that house. And if you didn't tell me, I would never know it's a 200-year-old house. I've been in the house, and it lacks the charm of an antique home like members of my family have owned in other towns. Any historical value was damaged when the house caught on fire several years ago, and the previous owners couldn't live there for almost a year. That must have required extensive remodeling due to smoke, fire, and water damage. Normally, I would be the last person in the world to recommend knocking down an old house, but frankly, I just don't think that house is worth saving. The white plastic fence has been hit on more than one occasion since that intersection where Greendale meets Webster is particularly dangerous. When Webster was being repaved about 10 years ago, I recommended that they change the curvature of that intersection, since people coming down Greendale were going too fast. Arrows were added on Webster Street and a stop sign placed in front of that house. The temple has always been a good neighbor and listened to our recommendations for improving traffic flow at peak times, such as Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. So when the temple wanted to add on a few years ago, we did not object. The temple now has a thriving faith-based community, and between programs, funerals, and holidays, they need more parking. Leveling the house will add around 25 parking spaces, but more important than that, it will remove an old house that is not very appealing and get rid of the fence that may be blocking the view of those driving in the area. And so I just wanted to give some positive feedback for why I think it should be a parking lot.
they tore down the Kingsbury House and put up a parking lot.
Kingsbury House?
Not paradise.
But it's not paradise.
I mean, I live in an area where McMansions are going up all over the place. And it would make me very sad for that house to be knocked down and a mansion be put there. I would much rather it be a parking lot.
Okay, are there any other comments from the public?
Madam Chair, there is one hand raised on Zoom.
Okay,
Jodine Coolman. I'll bring her over right now.
okay.
It usually takes a second or two.
Yes. Ah,
Rather nice historic house.
Pardon me?
In a rather nice historic house.
Yes, it is a nice.
It's a nice house.
which house is it?
It's Victorian, it's set back a little bit. It's like 3 or so from the.
Oh,
corner.
yeah.
Hello?
And Jodine, if you wouldn't mind turning your camera on so the other Zoom attendees can see you.
Hi.
Welcome. Would you be willing to tell us your address, please? So we
I
can,
live at 298 Webster Street, just a couple of houses down the street from the home in question. And it would be my own strong preference to have the house not be torn down. I think it is a charming home. Maybe it's not, historically as accurate as may save its life, but it is an older home. I live in an older home. I think dating back to 1895. And it just seems that it would be a shame to see one of the dwindling number of historic properties in Needham fall victim to the need for a parking lot. I would much rather have the historical home and the housing stock than a parking lot. And I do live in an area where there is, when the parking is needed for the temple, there's parking in front of my house, and I don't mind that. I understand that there are events and holidays that require extra parking, and I'm perfectly happy with having folks park on the street when it's needed.
okay, thank you very much. I wonder if there are comments in response to our public observations.
Question.
Yes, Laura, go ahead.
My question is with the widening of the road it's not Needham Street anymore. What is it?
That's Highland Avenue there.
Does that add any parking or just widens the road?
Not sure.
Just widens the road.
So there wouldn't be any parking along that road.
Right.
No, that's currently where our bus stop lets off the kids, which is why we have, the kids get off right
And
there.
I believe it's a state road until you get to Webster Street.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think it's from the Newton line to Webster Street, and after that, it's a town road.
Yeah, and I think achieving the necessary width is problematic enough
Yes.
that adding parking would not be part of the.
Yeah, we don't even
Part of
use
the
it during
plan.
night holiday.
Okay. Okay. Are there other comments or observations that people would like to make? We have one impassioned plea that to save the house and another to make good use of the land for the temple. So that's where we are.
Right.
Commissioners, do you have any comments?
I mean, I do, I can wait, or, you want me to go
Okay.
first?
Sure, why not?
Well, I feel strongly both ways. I'm sure that, the additional parking and access, I noticed there's a back entrance or exit, which I'm sure will probably facilitate some traffic patterns when there are large events. The gates come down. So probably half the neighborhood would like the traffic to be abated as much as possible. And there's a lot of historic houses in there, and there's probably a lot of people who probably would miss the house. And it changes the neighborhood. All of a sudden, the gateway into the residential neighborhood becomes more, commercial. I mean, and you did say it's coming down. Whether we impose the delay or not, the decision has been made. So we can't do anything about that. But, you know, how long, and also parking, is the parking necessary now because there's a area that's one cordoned off? Because I imagine that's because of COVID, because
So
some
current,
outdoor
it's
classrooms.
just to keep and so they eat outside and, yeah, we're just using that temporarily.
I must say, I'm a little perturbed personally to see the handicap spots being, you know, taken over and not recreated someplace else, you know, as well.
They,
And
there, I
maybe
think
if there
there
wasn't
are.
that area taken off because of COVID, maybe there wouldn't be a need for parking so much.
No, so there's, I believe that there are handicap spots available even with those barriers up.
You
I
have to
think they-
move, you have to move them.
Well, the kids just use that, those
Okay.
come and go
Okay,
during the day. The barriers so that the kids can eat outside. And but those spots are available and are not even, they don't even
So-
scratch the surface of what we need.
how long has the synagogue owned this property?
About a year and a half, almost 2 years.
And it was always purchased with you
No, we
became
actually-
landlords, and it was
Yep.
always purchased with the idea that you were gonna demolish
We
it.
actually looked, we had Dave look at to see if we could make classroom space out of it, which is what we're hoping to do with the other property that we bought. And because of the rabbit warren sort of interior, just really, you can't do it. But ultimately, we were hoping to get some parking spots out of it, whether we used the back or whatever. But once we
Okay.
realized we couldn't use it as functional office and mostly, we need the classroom space. We have,
All right, so here's the
hundreds
other
of
one,
kids.
the way up, but, well, so
Yeah.
where are you gonna be building that? Is like the next proposal gonna be? one
we
of
own
the-
a house 2 doors down. And so that house is gonna be
On which street?
on
That's
Greendale,
28 Greendale.
and that's
Okay.
gonna be
Yeah.
converted
There's,
to.
there's this house, as you're facing it from the street, there's this house, and there's a couple of condos, four condos.
Mhm.
And then on the other side of that, starting to go around the corner a little bit onto the more residential section there of Greendale. That's 28 Greendale.
All right, well, here's where I feel strongly, okay? You know, you said you commend us on, you know, our efforts to do historic preservation and you lean that way or sympathetic to that, okay? But yet, you know, I mean, the previous owners were not necessarily good, you know, over many years, not good caregivers of the historic property, okay? So it didn't attend to a historic look or anything as such. And I'm a strong believer in to maintain preservation and houses in this modern era is not to maintain them as old and narrow and confined, but to modernize. So is there, you know, if you really meant what you said about leaning towards commend historic preservation, might you ask your architect a year and a half ago, you know, is there a way that we could blow out walls, you know, and build this as a commercial industrial space, you know, maintaining just maybe the front facade and building classrooms, maybe even think, you know, we found that it's, again, the 6-month delay is and it has saved some houses because moving a house, right, it's really not that expensive. You know, it's like throwing things up and lifting it up off the foundation, and from there, you know, you could do anything you want with it. You know, so, you know, if you really wanted to, you know, be something for a neighborhood and tie this in and maybe move it in a better location, you know, and blow out a whole backside and leave the front and build classrooms. Maybe even build, you know, the backside could have been, you know, cinder block walls, you know, because it's a classroom style and not have to, you know, and you just leave the facade. So I know it's not in the, it doesn't make economical
Right.
sense at all.
And they say it's cost prohibitive and-
But,
yeah.
you know, to do historic preservation, like you said, has to be, you know, a
How
labor of
would
love,
that
has to
be?
be a labor of love. Therefore, one has to be really sort of committed to that, to tie in and have a vision of how to sort of do multi-use things. So
Okay.
That's my feelings. I think you could have explored some other options before getting here. In a year and a
Well,
half.
ultimately, I appreciate that. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Julie.
No, I appreciate what you're saying. I do. I just think that ultimately, one of the things that we desperately need as a community with 1,000 families is parking. And so that was always on the table for us. And I don't think that
Could you duck
changing
down
something
knock down
into,
the other house, you know,
But so-
it's not even a
well,
historic
isn't-
house and build parking there
However-
and save this one.
right? However, this one, its location at right next to our current space, not only is primary and it really makes it so that it makes most sense. But maybe I have it wrong, but leaving the front facade of anything and putting cinder block classrooms isn't preservation either. I just think that, and it's also probably not zoned for that, but you know, while we did look at it, Dave can tell you that's what we initially had him look to see if we could quickly use it as classroom space, which was impossible. Ultimately, I mean, I'm not gonna fib. You know, we need parking, and in order to be a good neighbor here, most neighbors, I do appreciate the neighbor across the street, and she has to live there. But ultimately, I think daily, you know, people talk about not minding the high holidays. However, you know, we're renting parking spots across the street, and you know, that's expensive. And what we ultimately really need is to keep people off the streets and stop renting parking.
Okay. John, you have
Yes,
some,
the purpose of the demolition delay is, at least in theory, is to try to find an alternative. If someone came with a bucket load of money,
Right, I was gonna say, we can, that would be a different issue,
it would be a different issue.
but yeah, but we're a nonprofit temple, we're a house of worship, and this is,
You still need parking.
Right.
yeah.
You still need the
So once we
parking.
build that classroom, then we need more parking.
Okay, so the idea of any kind of an alternate approach to it is so rough.
Unfortunately, it just doesn't make any financial or realistic sense. I mean, you know, you've heard from our neighbors, but also, you know, from our staff who's walking across Highland Avenue on a daily basis to get to parking, which isn't safe either. And we can't ever have kids walk over there, so we can't ever say, hey, parents, can you park over at our rented spaces, even if we could rent it in perpetuity.
Which you can't, yeah, it's a short.
It's a short term.
It's a short term. it's a
We did
short-term
look to
lease.
purchase it. It's not happening. So, I mean, we come here with having explored as much as we can with the idea that we actually need parking. And this is our unfortunately and fortunately, our best and most affordable option. You know, nobody wants to pay for something that you're gonna take down, but for us, it literally saves us money to not rent spots, which we currently do, and we have staff walk across every day.
Thank you.
Like Jeff, I'm of two minds. This has been a struggle in my mind for, you know, since it was first brought to our attention. Unfortunately, I think even the bucket full of money solution would not really solve the problem, because even if you had the wherewithal to completely restore this house to its, you know, to its original glory, it would no longer be an historic house. And I think, unfortunately, and this really hurts to say, I think this train left a long time ago. There is, I mean, I live in the neighborhood. You do indeed have a parking problem. We do indeed not mind. It's just kind of fun. It's, you know, see all the families walking by and all the cars strung along. But it is indicative that parking for this growing congregation is not adequate. At one point, I got my copy of the inventory out and actually drove around Needham to look for, you know, all the houses on the inventory and see where they were. I drove around this one a couple times thinking it's got to be here somewhere. It does not present as an historic house. It does not have any significant historic material remaining. It is heavily compromised. As a member of the neighborhood, I would much rather see parking here than on Greendale, which I don't think zoning would allow you to do anyway. I would love to see, this house be restored and be beautiful, but I don't think that's possible any longer. And given that the prospects for preservation are just not there, I don't see a way forward that would restore an historic asset. However willing anybody was to compromise, or however much money was available to do it. I just don't see this as a recoverable asset any longer.
Laura. I have no questions, thank you.
Okay.
I agree mainly with Gloria's points. It seems to me like the house has sort of lost most of its historical character, and as much as it's our decision to bring it down, it doesn't seem like there's much of historical worth to preserve at this point. That's all. So.
And as chair, I will also have my say. My first reaction was, oh no. I mean, it's been there for all of my life, well, most of my life.
And then some.
And then some. And then some. Indeed. Indeed.
A few more years.
Yeah, I remember when it actually, 66 years ago, it actually looked a lot better when I moved here, but it's not there anymore. And I recognize that the truth that, if we imposed a delay, architect is not going to find a way to make this better and make it usable for the temple. And in 6 months, we will lose what used to be a beautiful house. It really did have, it did have a lot of class. And it was also a nice entrance to the Webster Street area, but it's gone. And so are we?
Actually, one question. You said you thought there was an original window?
Yes.
And
which
I'm
one is
staring
it?
at this facade and I'm not seeing anything.
Well, I'm
Even
pointing
the
out- I'm
404 is
pointing out the
not.
only month in left. It's got to be older than the replacement
1910,
vinyl.
yeah, it's 1910 like mine. But it's not 1814, that's for sure.
That's not.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Are we ready for a vote then? And can we have a motion?
I'm sure.
I'm sorry.
Just to confirm that you did close public comment before for discussion.
Thank you. Yes, I am going
You
to
did have one
close.
hand raised, which is why I wanted to.
Oh,
and the hand
please.
was just raised.
Oh,
during-
okay. In that case, let us hear from this person.
Would you, all right, I will let in Jeremy Shia.
Okay.
1 moment. I got a list for you.
Okay.
You made a motion, I read it.
Mhm. Yes.
Still working.
So you say.
I think we'd have all these technical issues resolved by now.
Well, you
Zoom
just
as
started
long as
this.
we have. but
No,
it's- But it's a struggle. It's often still a struggle.
Yes, it is. And if something can go wrong, it will. Every single time.
It does often take a little bit
Yes,
to move
it's
folks over
284,
from
right?
attendee to panelist.
284, yes.
All right,
It is.
Jeremy has joined us.
Yes,
Oh, sorry. It took me a while to figure out. So you guys hear me okay?
yes, indeed. Would you tell us where you live, Mr. Shea?
Yes. So I'm living at 60 Davenport Road, which is right next behind 36 Greendale Avenue. So we really literally right next to the temple. And currently our own private road, Davenport Road, is actually was used by the temple, used temporarily, because pandemic, as the vehicle leaving the parking lot, and they have a daycare center, I believe, on site, so they use it as as exit. So I believe minimum twice a day. So as a neighbor, so I have to say the Temple do the best they could. So I really appreciate that, but it has been some issue from time to time. So I heard, sorry, I'm coming a little bit late. So I'm actually currently in Canada, so I'm visiting my parents here. So, but I think this is important enough for me to sort of dive in. I think the fundamental issue here is really kind of overlooked is overall the Temple, the site, it is what you see today. It's really limited. So unless Temple buy the whole sections, the whole block, it really not meant for 1,000 members or for the daycares. So I think that's what a fundamental issue is. They keep buying the neighborhood, which is buying my neighbor 28. I'm expecting maybe I'll be the next target. I think the fundamental just there's so many Temple members. It just the size, just the way it is, there's the size is limited, the area it is. So it's just not really meant for the purpose of what they're trying to do today. So from my point of view is all this is just patches, trying to patch the issue, but really fundamentally just Temple just, it wasn't really, the size is too small, period. So that's my comment. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Shea, and thank you for calling from Canada. You win the distance award for the day. Okay, are there, I cannot make a motion. as
Oh,
chair.
sure. Okay,
You must.
I'd like to propose a motion that the Needham Historical Commission find that the house at 284, it's 284, right, not 283? 284. Moved that the Needham Historical Commission find that the house at 284 Webster Street, the Thomas Kingsbury House built in 1814, be preferably preserved and a 6-month demolition delay be imposed.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Tom seconded. And we will have a vote now. Okay, roll call vote. And we will start again with the end of the table. Mr.
I'm
Howard.
gonna abstain.
And Don,
No,
Gloria,
No,
and Laura?
No,
Nope.
Okay, so the motion to,
chair votes.
oh, I have to vote too. Can I vote no? Okay, so we have 4 noes and 1 abstention. So the motion that the House be preferably
Five,
5.
5 with 1 abstention.
Sorry, Rick.
did you?
Yes, I did.
She just didn't write it
Yes,
down.
I did. I just didn't write it down. Okay, so that the motion on the floor has been defeated and we do not have a 6-month delay.
thank you very much.
So, thank you, I appreciate that. So you'll be sending some
We'll
kind of
be
a notice to
sending
the
a
building
notice to Mr. Roach at the planning board.
department? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to keep these? Because they're so beautiful.
Okay.
You don't need to also talk.
Very nice photos.
The time I've been there, the house has been
Disreputable.
But I look out at that every day, and if I thought that that house was so
Let's get the rest of that.
I'm here
Thank you, David.
in the
Okay,
office.
we can give the whole list to you at the end.
But-
Sure.
You know, there's those 4 condos that are next to it are actually quite attractive and well landscaped. Nice.
This can't be shown on the screen, is that right, Miles? Okay.
And we don't have enough.
Actually, I can share, and I will share the presentation
Let me get
on
started.
Zoom with the attendees because there is the
So
presentation.
they will
Oh,
see it. It's not
okay,
us.
so they will see, okay.
Yeah, they'll see the presentation.
All right, well, you wouldn't jump ahead already, so now
Oh, okay.
there's no.
Well,
Okay.
we still have people
All right.
here.
Yeah, do
And-
they need,
So,
you want copies? You're welcome to have mine.
Is this the same as the presentation?
Yes.
You're welcome.
my name is Vadim Kite of 100 Rosemary Way, apartment 232. Thank you for taking the time to hear this on a Thursday. So a little context, I've been a resident of Needham for I think 11 years at 100 Rosemary Way, apartment 232. When my wife and I had a couple of kids a few years ago, we started looking to expand somewhere. It's hard to live in a 1,032 square feet with 2 kids. So it's been done. It's been done in Russia where I came from, but it's no easy task. The market was incredibly competitive. I reached out to my father-in-law for some help, which he did when we acquired this property. And, the property was put in LLC as per his lawyer's suggestion. He helped us buy it, I think with the initial intent that he would live with us at some point down the road. That's my guess. After that moment, as you all know, the whole situation with Ukraine happened, which his business primarily is based in Ukraine, or a lot of it depends on that, at which moment he said that it's probably not on the cards for him to further help with this kind of endeavor. And so at that point, we were kind of on the fence of what to do with it, but whatever we're gonna do with it, we had more space. That's a start, even when we could have figured out. So my initial intent was not necessarily to demolish the property and build a new. It was probably more like 50-50 with my father's input, who loves art and is all about, views himself as a British dandy for some reason, although he has nothing to do with Britain. he views himself as a person of the arts, but anyways, I digress a little bit. So that's kind of what brings me to this situation right now. I've had opinions given to me by 2 builders, one named David Kane from Weston, who's been restoring properties in Weston, including his own house, as a family friend. Probably for 25 years he's been doing that. Who appreciates these type of situation, kind of is a challenge to him to show how it could be improved and so on and so forth. So I don't am here to testify because frankly, I feel I didn't want to burn anyone and say, how come speak on my behalf? He's a busy man. And I talked to a local builder named Bruce Riccadelli, who's been in the community for a long time, to get his input. The house, I think, as we established the previous hearings, does not have any historical significance in terms of what is tangible outside of the house and inside, for the most part. And I'm sounding a little redundant here, so I'll save you time. Essentially, everything that gentleman said applies to this current property, although I don't think there's any window that's not new. I think all the windows are new vinyl windows. I think everything's been replaced, a pool added, obviously, I think you guys know that. So on and so forth. Initially, the idea of preserving the house was a possibility because it does provide the square footage for that. The footprint was okay to possibly move in a family, possibly invest some money initially to just kind of spruce it up, live there for the foreseeable future, and then maybe rethink of something else. It would be difficult to accomplish a lot of things because of the HERS rating. First of all, the house is the new stretch core that Needham adopted. There's some setback violations. I'm not sure how that plays into when you do remodeling, but like the current fence is in the paper, on the paper road of the town of Needham. So there's certain minor setbacks that kind of are already a violation. Well, the fence could obviously be easily removed, but it's already on the paper road, probably a couple of feet there. So that's where we are. Then a few months after he purchased the property, there's a flood. I've attached the report and I can go into that now. Probably should have started with the report, but it's the last few pages. You could see just the. Sorry, I should have put this first. I put him on the very last 2 pages is actually the report from the fire department. And mind you, this flood happened when the house was not insured. So there is no, because my father-in-law bought it initially outright, there was no insurance initially on the property. We were shopping around for rates, and this is kind of unexpected, obviously. I've talked to the fire department, one of the deputies, and asked him how could this happen, and the temperatures inside the house was 63, 65 degrees, something like that. He said it happened in his house in Maine where drafts, because pipes actually burst in 2 areas, one on the first floor bathroom by the wall and one on the second floor. So essentially the house, if you can start from the beginning, you know, the upstairs area bathroom was flooded. The water went down the stairs and through the ceiling that you could see completely collapsed through that first floor onto the first floor, all the areas that you could see here, and eventually ended in 4 feet of water in the basement, which took several hours to pump out. After seeing that, I had my wife call some of these restoration companies to see what even to get it to the current state that it was before would take. One company said that they're about a year backed up. So that was a little discouraging. Because in my imagination, even to restore to its original shape, there might be mold issues, right? We're talking about 4 feet of water sitting in the basement. I don't know what happens when water sits, gets drained out, the moisture. I would need their input on that. So in my mind right now, after doing all the math and talking this over, talking to the bank, how feasible it is to even restore anything, it's not gonna happen. It's impossible for us to do. The house, even if restored to what it was before, would not be worth the money on the market. The damage is probably, I would say, probably in a couple $100,000 area, and that would just to get the mold and do all the checks and the painting, the walls, the drywalls and all that stuff, because water was everywhere, essentially 4 feet of water from the top floor draining through the house to the basement and so on and so forth. So with all those things in consideration, I got a plan from Mike McCabe, who's a longtime resident of Needham. I went around, asked a couple of neighbors as to their input, the immediate neighbors. The feedback I received was the house is an eyesore, and I welcome, you know, kind of the demolition of it. And I welcome a new house to a new family. At this moment, I don't know if that new family will be me. It may be, it may not be, based on certain other economical situations with my father-in-law. Regardless, it's not possible for me to financially afford to just restore this house and whatnot. And even if restored, there's nothing really original to restore. There's no ornate molding. The house has been given a complete facelift, including the pool, probably over many, many years. Aside from that, the previous owner kept the house in a not so, well, I can't say in a state of disrepair, but it wasn't maintained that well. So this is how I find myself kind of at your mercy and asking to have the ability to demolish this house and work, hopefully get stuff done around the summer when families are waiting, which is the input I received from my immediate neighbors would be kind of welcome to them. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Not as polished as the previous attorney, but it is what it is.
In itself, no problem. I do have a question.
Yeah,
If you demolish the house, what would you then do? Rebuild on the site?
it would be one of the houses, the probably colonial house that Michael McKay has designed.
But you would rebuild it yourself? You would,
I
finance through
I would
building? Are
rebuild
you a
it.
builder
I would,
or- As well?
I'm
or-
I'm an IT consultant in pharmaceutical, but I'm moving away from that into hopefully being a builder primarily because I wanted to build my own house. Initially, when I was looking for a property with my wife and I came to builders, the set of rules they set for me was, oh, you have to use my agent and you have to do this, how I said. So essentially they were like gods. And I said, this is not something that I want to do. I don't want somebody to dictate for me how I have to do things. And if I want to buy a house, I have to use their wife as an agent, and then I have to live within his confines. So I've done this before myself. Previously, my father had a construction background back in Washington. My uncle is an ornamental plasterer who restored actually the Boston Opera House. I initially used to leverage some of his skills, but there's nothing there that I actually restore. That would be for free for me. So obviously it would make financial sense for me if there was some kind of ornamental plastering, but there wasn't anything there. There wasn't maybe slightly older chandelier that I would probably take with me. A sconce similar to one of these. And aside from that, there wasn't really much there. So this would essentially be my second job in addition to my job that I do now. But it's something that I found to be more rewarding than what I'm doing now. So
My dad had a similar impulse and then was an architect for the remaining 60 years of his life.
yeah, well, hopefully.
He left into the insurance business
Well, that's
to build his own house and then became an architect.
Yeah, so that's basically where I am.
Thank you very much. Do we have comments from the public?
Yeah, I do.
Yes, you are.
I'm Sue Kennel. My husband George, we live at 16 Wyoming, 2 houses down.
Right.
Is great friends with Nancy Weather all the time. We've lived there for 30 years, so I've been in out of the house for a very long time. I guess my biggest question is, a letter was sent out on January 31st, before the flood ever happened, stating that the intention was to demolish the house.
Yep.
So I'm having a hard time keeping up with this whole conversation,
So-
since it seems that the flood is the reason the house is being demolished, because there's all this damage, but in fact, neighbors received a letter stating that the house was gonna be demolished only a few weeks after the closing.
Right, so what initially, like I said, it was 50-50, but so we sent
Not
out
what
the
the
letter.
letter said.
Right, no, like I said in the beginning, the initial was, we had a 50-50 wish whether we're gonna demolish it or not, but either way, I thought we should just give them, just in case, a heads up, because I knew either way the house is historical. And I know the procedures for historical is to send out a letter, so I sent a letter ahead of time, just in case, whatever the result was gonna be.
So
I
the
went-
letter said, we wanted to let you know that we plan on demolishing the house located at 28 Wyoming Avenue in the spring of 2022. That was on January 31st,
Right,
which I believe is only a few weeks after closing, since I'm.
Yeah,
Right.
the house
Yeah, that-
closed on January 13th.
yep,
Right, so
so,
January 31st, the letter went out saying that the plan was to demolish it during this spring, which just seems a little inconsistent with what you're saying.
well, like I said,
And
it
I,
was.
the house has been, through a lot of cold winters, things happen.
Things do happen, but not 4 feet of water. That's not,
I understand, I'm just saying, I've been in, and out of that house in very cold days, when Nancy and Ward were away, when that, it just. I'm concerned, I understand the house needs a lot of work, I understand it's a complicated property, and it's gonna be extremely complicated to build there. We're a dead end street, we're small, we have but a little pathway that goes over to a parkway, it's town land, there's trees that are hanging over, but are also an integral part of our neighborhood. That are on town land, but also on that property, I don't know how the trucks are even gonna access, and something's gonna have to be done, so I accept that.
I completely understand what you're
the-
saying. I'm sorry.
The consistency of the story is just.
Yeah, I feel
Next
like,
question.
I feel like you're suggesting something, and right from the beginning, I said we were 50-50. Now, me know the procedure, what happens if I send out a letter, I know it's not gonna be demolished in the spring. It was just pretty much a template letter that was sent out as we were contemplating with my father-in-law exactly what we're gonna do, I said, okay, if we're not sure which way to go, let's give people the heads up and then see what we decide.
I
But-
guess I'm also concerned about the neighbors saying the house was an eyesore, because like I said, we've lived there for 30 years, I've never heard anyone say that.
Yeah,
I know
that's,
my neighbors might have said, across the street might have said, you know, it's okay to tear it down, or I don't think anyone in our neighborhood ever thought it was. It's a pointless little
I literally
house.
quoted her, I wrote the quote on a piece of paper and I said, I'm not gonna use any names. Do you mind if I share this? She said, I don't mind. So her literal quote was, it's a
On our
nice,
street, you're saying.
on your street, yes, on your street, yep. So again, I don't wanna name names and name addresses and
How many neighbors told me? Some of them are on the Zoom right now. I'm wondering. How to speak up.
May I ask why you didn't notify the commission rather than sending this letter out?
it was just a template letter that was done, just,
But-
it wasn't.
It
I
is in
thought it-
violation of the bylaws.
The letter itself does not necessarily mean that I'm gonna do anything. I wanted to just, in case if something were to done, to be courteous and say, we may be thinking of doing this. Feel free to reach out with any concerns and whatnot. I just thought it was trying to be maybe proactive in case something does happen down the road.
Okay.
Because if I put myself in this, shoe, I'd rather know ahead of time. And if it doesn't happen, then it doesn't happen. But at least somebody reached out to me first with their personal phone number and let me know how what's what. And I was also trying to gauge what kind of feedback I would get from that, because if I received a letter, somebody saying, no, do not ever demolish this property, I love it, then I would say, okay, maybe we need to reconsider and reweigh and decide what, because we had 2 sheets side by side in the 2 weeks that we bought, deciding what could possibly be if we do this, or it could possibly look like if we do this. So the letter was, it was a painless thing that I thought was an courtesy. I guess it seemed more, to me, it was an innocuous thing versus something that's kind of like some kind of surreptitious motive that I knew ahead of time exactly what was gonna happen. Because I don't know that, I know I have to go to the historical commission. There's a big plaque on the house. So for me to send a letter to say, oh yeah, well, I really, had the foresight, I'm gonna do this. It was just a template that I sent out. And I don't remember who maybe my wife mailed it, or I was like, okay, let's be kinder and just let people know that this may happen. But now it's being spun around like some kind of a grand master scheme that
And we've had similar letters from builders when it hasn't been in the situation of historic house, but have had builders reach out when they know they're demolishing a property.
And I actually had a neighbor reach out to me today saying, why didn't you send me this letter? I said, this letter was just sent out. I thought I sent it to you. It's not a formal anything. It's just because it can't be a formal. I don't have a permit to demolish. It's just saying, this is who I am. We may be thinking of this, doing this. Call me if you can. And I understand, the sentimentality of somebody having to live in that house. I lived in a house growing up with my parents that I drive by sometimes now as well. Would I tell somebody that I don't want you to demolish this house because I live there or my family lived there? No, because that's not for me. Kind of, I cherish that memory through pictures or whatever else, but I can't, I can't.
So I'm in the sort of the real estate and banking business, and the LLC to acquire the house was created on January 11th.
Yeah.
And the LLC, the nature of the business of the LLC is to acquire, manage, lease, develop, own, operate, and sell real property. So it sort of seems like the LLC was created to develop the property and resell it. It doesn't seem like it was ever intended to be an owner occupied residence.
Well,
Otherwise, this.
My father-in-law bought this apartment, so he's the one that talked to his attorney on how to do that.
No, I understand.
Whatever the advice his attorney gave, if he's paying the money in cash and I divorce his wife tomorrow, I don't know. I
understand.
If he puts it in my name, then it's not, you understand what, I divorce his wife tomorrow and I essentially walk away with all the money that he put down for the apartment. And the only way the only way you can even secure a property in Needham nowadays, it has 25 offers, was to do what my father-in-law did, because there were literally 15 offers for the house. So
Okay.
That part was handled by his attorney, at the advice of his attorney. I think it's just,
No, I understand, but you're part of the LLC.
right, because he.
I just, that's neither here nor there,
And we
but
have two people on Zoom.
Yes, we currently have two raised hands on Zoom. The first person we will address is Martha Schleck, and we'll be patient with the Zoom as we make Martha a panelist. After Martha, we have Howard Hirsch.
Okay.
Howard will come up after Martha.
Okay.
Martha is now with us and is connecting.
Hello, please let us know your thoughts about this property.
Martha, you're on mute at this time. If you can unmute and turn on your video.
There we go. I'm not sure how to undo the video. I thought it was on. Oh, here we go. Hold on. I got it. There we go. Here I am. Hi, well, I'm Martha Schleck, and
Where do you live, Martha?
I live at 22 Wyoming Avenue. And I have been a next door neighbor of 28 Wyoming Avenue for 28 years. And I just have to say that, a few facts here that have been stated. The property closed on January 13th. I should also state that I am a real estate agent in Needham. The letter went out, the notification went out on January 31st about demolishing the property. As Sue Kennel and George, my neighbors, have stated, both of us, all of us, have been in and out of the house on numerous occasions over the course of 28, 30 years. I think one question I had in my mind as I listened to this tonight was, what warrants the Historical Commission for putting a plaque on a house and designating it historically significant in the first place? And that comes to my mind tonight because I have another letter in my hand with the demolition plan for this house, suggesting that so many things have changed within the structure of the house that designate it no longer historically significant, but all of those things have happened prior to my living next door to them. And that plaque went up after I lived here. So the plaque went up, it was designated historical, and now we're questioning whether there's any historical significance to the house. That's number one. Number two, 5 days after the notification of demolition was sent, there was a pipe that burst in the house. Again, the house had been empty since last March, a year ago. And prior to that, Mrs. Weatherall's husband passed away in 2015. And Sue and George and I moved Mrs. Weatherall down to the first floor to live during that time. So no one was living on the second floor in all those years. So I find it unusual that pipes would burst within the house within 5 days, 2 weeks of a new owner owning it.
May I speak?
And I, being the next door neighbor, have never, ever called that house an eyesore. I don't know who did in this neighborhood. I find that very strange.
May I speak?
Have you finished, Martha, or would you like to say more?
I'm finished.
All right, thank you, Martha. I'll move you back to the role as an attendee.
Okay, and yes, Mr. Kite. I think. go ahead.
Martha, it was nice to hear from you. I think, Martha, when I purchased the house, you actually met my father-in-law and I, as he was looking around the house, and you specifically asked him, what do you guys plan to do with it? And I specifically answered, I'm not sure, we may remodel it, as I think my father-in-law alluded to the same thing, or I may move in to live here with my wife. We're not quite sure just yet. That's the first thing. And you can say whether you remember that conversation or not. The second thing is, the fire department was there to verify the flood. Okay, these suggestions that this was some kind of like a stage thing are, first of all, very, very insulting. Essentially, I'm being accused of bursting the pipes myself. Is that what's going on here? Somehow getting inside the wall to burst the pipes and then having the fire department come there and say, no, this happens all the time. I've seen it happen in my house in Maine. It's ludicrous. How would that benefit me? First of all, now I can't move in there. You can't rent the house out. And there was no insurance on the house to even fix the wall. I mean, it's, besides the fact it was like, the thermometer was set on 63 degrees. So while I understand somebody may have been living there, maybe they were turning the water on and off. I don't know. I'm not a flood expert. I did myself ask the fire department lieutenant or deputy, how could this have happened? And he said, I've seen it happen in my house in Maine. It could be when drafts get into a wall or something that's close to all these things tend to happen.
Okay, I think that we ought to hear from Mr. Hirsch. You
Yes,
can-
Howard Hirsch's hand is still up. We will bring him over.
Excellent.
Howard, you are now a panelist. If you can unmute yourself and turn your video on, thank you.
I defer to my wife, Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Hirsch and we're at 21 Wyoming Ave. The three neighbors that are closest to 28 Wyoming are the ones that are here. First of all, I want to say that when I first met Radim, he was very polite, he was very nice. We had a conversation. I too asked what his intentions were. He did say to me at that time, he wasn't really sure. However, there was an indication more so that it was going to be taken down than being renovated. I did say to him, I did not under any circumstances say that the house was an eyesore. However, I did say that I don't have a problem with the house taken down. I don't know what the historical significance to the home is. And I think that that's very important. Like, what is the historical significance? No one said it. What was the initial address of 28 Wyoming Ave? It's my understanding that it was not always on Wyoming Ave and that it was initially on Beaufort Street. However, that might be not correct. So, and I'm not playing historic. I did not receive whatever letter is being spoken about. I did not receive that letter. If it's the house is not, like, again, like, what's the historical significance? If it's something that is super historical, I'm a modern person, so for me, taking the house down, I live in a home that was taken down. So for me, that's not my preference of a home. But with that said, again, I think what's most important is the historical significance and determining what that is. Yeah, that's kind of it. That's all I have to say.
Okay, I think that Gloria Grice, who is the executive director of the Needham History Center and Museum, is certainly in the position to talk about the importance of the house to Needham's history.
The house, thank you for your comments. The house represents a period of time when the town was, it was a huge shift in the town's center of gravity, in the town's demographic. The railroad came through shortly before and basically took every, the old center was at the corner of Nohoyden and Central, and basically moved everything into the Great Plain in a fairly short period of time. So that whole period is one of rapid development of the population, the new population of that part of town. It's also, this particular house also represents the influx of new immigrants into Needham. The Minchins and then the people they sold it to were Irish who arrived at the time of the famine and were starting to make inroads out of the laboring class into the middle class in Needham, and building this house was a significant move for them and for the people that arrived around the same time they did. I did want to comment on the address thing. If you look at an aerial map, I know we have one sitting right in front of us, and you might you might not right now, but as you know, Wyoming is a short street. I mean, it has a second half, but this part of Wyoming that comes off of Mount Vernon is sort of a stub. It was originally Wyoming Ave was the pathway to this house. It wasn't a named street until the 1930s, so the house didn't have the address of 28 Wyoming Ave or whatever Wyoming Ave until the 30s. The nearest available street was either Beaufort or Great Plains. So for a time it was known as being on Beaufort Street. For a time it was known as being off Great Plain. But the house itself shows up on the maps going back as far as the earliest, nearest closest map to this time period, 1876. The house is already shown in that spot. So it hasn't moved at all. And the address hasn't moved. It's basically that the system of naming roads has changed over the years.
Rory?
Yeah.
You know, from what I read, and to answer the question, I think what makes the house, you know, historic actually is, you know, what I read was that its original address was a Great Plain Avenue address. You know, there wasn't the Perry Park or there wasn't Beaufort Avenue, you know, and it talked about the, you know, that period of time that you talked about as the town expanded. They talked about the first things that were built were like Great Plain Ave that went down there, and then Webster, and then all, you know, so houses were being built from the filling in from those like main thoroughfares, you know, and then the Craftsman with the mills and the expansion of Needham, you know, that house was, so some of the ornate architectural features, which most of them are hidden by the house, but there's still some corbels, you know, showing on you know, beyond the aluminum siding. There's that bay window. So, you know, that was probably one of the first houses, you know, that was sort of built there, and everything was, you know, and everything. And they filled in along Webster and all those small streets, you know, for, you know, which if you go in there, you can probably pick out the very first houses that were built. You know, they're probably every quarter mile apart, you know, in there until those streets started to get built and labeled, and then they filled in houses. So that's sort of that beginning of that Needham expansion and growth in that direction, and again those features. So that's just answering that question. I'm going to reserve my comments to when we get to that.
That is the first house in sort of in this little map we're looking at, other than the John Bird house, which is mid 1700s. It's sort of just off the map. The mentioned Broadley house is the first. It was the road we called Wyoming was actually a lane built to access that house.
That was probably all their property. I mean, they probably owned, you know, 10 acres.
It was divided into 4 pieces.
Yeah.
4 lots at some point.
Yeah, it's been subdivided over time, but at one point it was basically just a lane that led to this house.
I mean, how Needham, not to go on a tangent, but, you know, looking at the Kingsbury House, we talked about that historic, and there were several Kingsbury houses. Well, the other Kingsbury houses that were on Great Plain Avenue near me owned all the property from there until like to the cemetery. There were very few
beyond.
houses, those are like lots. People owned, from the Great Plain to the whatever body of water or something, it filled in like that. That's how the town got developed, and they sold acreage, not lots,
Mhm. Yes, because Minchin was a farmer. Yeah. And he worked as a farmer in Needham.
Madam
Okay,
Chair, would you like to have Howard and Lori removed back to the attendees?
yes, I think so. Unless you have some other things to say.
Were the questions answered? Or-
Were your questions answered?
You're on mute.
I'll say yes. Hello?
It appears they're nodding yes.
Yes,
Okay.
oh, they're not, yes, so good. Okay, thank you. Okay, are there,
Yes, Martha Schleck has re-raised her hand. Should you like to
okay,
recognize
yes,
her?
yes, please. Martha, come back.
Martha, I'm promoting you to panelist now. Martha, you're back as a panelist, but you are muted. Martha, we see you as a panelist, but you are on mute.
Third time will be a charm.
Into the prompt.
Oh, I know I should be proficient at this point.
No, we don't want to become.
It's all this compute that all collapses on the computer. I go back and I try. I just want to readdress Vadim. And I just want to say, I absolutely do remember the conversation. You and your father-in-law or dad, I don't remember if it was you and your dad or your father-in-law. And I am by no means, I want to be very clear about this. I am by no means suggesting anything. I was only stating the facts that as I know them in terms of the timeline. So that's all I was trying to do. And to just suggest that as having been in the home, again, I am no judge of what connotates or dictates by the commission as an historical home, but I am saddened personally as to what happened inside the house. It's devastating. I'm thankful that nobody was hurt. And I recognize that ultimately we unfortunately will not stop the demolition of our historical homes. I look to the bylaws of the commission and recognize there are delays for a reason. And I just want to understand if there are these bylaws, what is the criteria to adhering to them? So I don't want to see a very quick decision on, okay, something happened and therefore we do this. I'd like further discussion, further exploration. And that's where I'm coming from as a citizen of Needham. And as an abutter, that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, and yes, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I agree. I understand that for whoever were to buy this house, it's complicated. I can't even say how many times I've been in that house. But I also feel like it has to be like a real conversation. The main part of that house, I believe the part that is the historical part of that house, which is most of it, I think had a lot of historical integrity to it. From the banisters to the design of, you could feel that house, that it was, that it, like it. So for me, I would just like the conversation, I hate to say it, but to be a real conversation about what do we do? And now obviously there's this damage in the house for however that happened and whatever, but you know, I think like Martha, like, there's not a lot of historical houses left in Needham. They're all being raised for these new houses that can be sold for the market price and whatever. Honestly, I think like Martha, I want to understand why do you have a plaque on your house and why is it deemed historical if scenarios like this can just happen? And yeah, I mean, I have sympathy for the new owner. I get that, but I just feel like
I'm sorry, but
I think I just would feel better if it wasn't strict of saying it was, this house is like that other house on Great Plain. It's not. It's not that like the house that we just discussed. I drove by the other house. This house isn't, like, just drive, if you've driven down our street and you look at it and you know it's an old house that has historical meaning. Like, you can feel that about this house. It's different. So I guess I just want that to be present. It's not like the other one. It's not without feeling. And yet I get the situation now. So
I completely have compassion for what you're saying, but this is not, the purpose of this delay is not to save a house that you used to visit or somebody used to visit.
I get that.
Because what you're saying essentially is the financial burden should be imposed on me and my family that lives in a 2-bedroom home to carry this mortgage. And that should be done because you visited a friend there.
No,
Now,
that's
I
not
don't mean to
what
sound cold-hearted or anything like that, but my family takes priority to me. You know, that's what's important for me.
It's not the
And-
sentimentality of me having visited the house. It's the
Okay.
fact that I have been in the house many, many times to witness what my understanding is you did not go into the house when you bought it. That's what I was told by the owner's son, by the realtor. You bought the house from outside the house. You never went inside to see the inside. of the
I
house.
did have COVID at the time when the house was purchased. That is true.
Right, so I'm
And I
just
looked,
saying
and I
that-
looked at the pictures and I've been to probably 30 open houses that I did not get because I wasn't aggressive enough in my
Right,
offers.
and I understand all that, but I'm saying I have been in the house a lot.
And
to
I
say that it
also
doesn't
understand all
have
that. I understand.
Historical, that is present, that is part of what this picture is, and it still may mean that the house has to come down.
I
And
completely,
the
understand.
truth of that house is it does kind of, like, it does possess that history, and so that's up to the commission what that means, and it's also complicated now because you're in a situation, but I just feel like that all has to be honestly in the room, because that's what this story is about. It's about a beautiful old house, and what do we do with that in Needham, and what is all these other houses that are just gonna, and what is that gonna look to make it marketable, like with the land that all that meant, what is it, like, you know, just the whole picture. I just think there's a lot of questions.
unfortunately, you're talking about a bigger, broader picture because cities like Newton have a year-long delay and that hasn't deterred people. And people, and Cambridge may have even longer delays. So what we're talking about right now is what is this delay going to accomplish? It's not going to save this house because I'm not going bankrupt to save a house that I unfortunately have this history with. I'm merely saying that the purpose of this delay is to preserve something. Now, I explored those options initially, despite I'm sitting here feeling accused of many things or with these veiled statements. Okay, the house was visited by a fire marshal first, you know, and it was an LLC. Yes, that's the lawyers say put the house in LLC. That's just the advice. I couldn't say yes or no. I had an interest, financial interest, because my father-in-law didn't pay everything for the house, so I had to have it my name in the LLC and so on and so forth. Those are all kind of digressions from the main point. Is this is meant to save the house, the delay. Unfortunately, it will not preserve this house. because I cannot make it feasible enough to do so. If it was feasible financially and the bank said, yes, I will give you this money and this may, and my wife said, yes, we can move in, but this house has stayed in vacant. It was then vacant for 6 more months because I cannot move myself or my wife in there or anyone else because the ceiling may collapse. And that's the reality of it. And I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry that, I'm sorry that you can't visit your friend there, but that's not.
Now, I think that what we need to do is recognize what the commission is charged with. We are charged with protecting buildings that have been put on our inventory and making sure that they are, that every opportunity is given to the owner to make the changes that will save the house as an historic house. Now, the reality is, and the sad reality that everyone on this commission lives with, is that the 6-month delay does not remove you from ownership. If the 6-month delay is imposed, you have control after the 6 months. But our role is not to deal with the people who live there, but our role is to deal with the historic importance of the house. We've been told about that. Whether or not everyone agrees with that, that is, in fact, what the Secretary of State's material says about the house, that it is important. So that with respect, you're sending out a letter saying that we're going to tear it down, was simply ignoring the fact that it is an historic piece of Needham. And one of the things that people come to Needham for is for the sense of place. And one of the things that gives Needham a sense of place are our houses. And at our last public meeting, someone said, if this house goes, it can never be replaced. And it really cannot. This is a moment in time when we as the commission must take a look at our responsibilities to preserve an historic house.
I wholeheartedly understand that. The letter was probably sent a little bit, as you can see, it didn't go to everyone. I don't know. I don't remember the thinking behind it, to be honest with you. If it went out to one person or 2 people, it didn't.
But it was inappropriate. You understand that now.
I completely understand. I never
Yes.
for
Okay.
a moment disagreed with that.
Yes, Jeff.
Are we going to a comment period?
Yes, we still have another hand.
The hand has just, yes, we still have one hand up, Michael Stifler.
Okay, yes, let's hear from Mr. Stifler.
Michael, promoting you to a panelist, please unmute yourself once you become a panelist.
Hi, it's actually Andrea Stifler. I couldn't figure out how to change the name beforehand. And I live on Wachusett Road, so I live a street above, and we have met the previous owner of the house while selling popcorns with my kids, and she was so proud of how historical her home had been in the past before COVID. And now I understand there is some damage to the house, and it's really sad to see historical homes being demolished just to build some newer, bigger home. There are so many of those already, and I was just wondering, why would a historical house be purchased without insurance if there is no intent to just tear it down? Thank you.
Could I ask you, Ms. Stifler, what number Wachusett you live at?
40.
What number Wachusett?
40.
Thank you very much. Okay. I think the question was to you.
Basically, I was shopping around and there was overlook on my part. The truth of the matter, I thought is little risk to anything happening to the house. And I was waiting for between two agents to get a better rate, and they wanted to save money. That's pretty much the reason for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you have any more questions? Ms. Stifler?
In hindsight, obviously, it was a mistake.
Do we have any other hands?
There are no other hands left, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you very much. In which case, I think we will close the public comments and we will begin to discuss this. Yes, Jeff.
I guess I'll start with, I don't think I have a problem with, sort of your process. Anybody who's entering into a large renovation, rebuild, question, would be wise to do an LLC, which protects them from, the construction liabilities and the like, and that's a protection, and that's why lawyers do that. I own 3 LLCs, and I think that maybe sending a letter and meeting to the neighbors is, and opening yourself up to some feedback is, again, I think commendable rather than, just coming in like barnstormers and doing that. I think without the flood, it's really apparent that this house has been neglected for many years. There was no attention, as to, in some ways, keeping it looking historic between vinyl siding, hiding many of the details. I wouldn't know what's under that. There are some, what I said is there's some things that are peering through, showing some of the craftsmanship of that era. So that's when questioning what historic. Well, that's that, and then recognizing that, looking at lot. And now that lot is a minimum. It's the bare minimum lot, 10,000 square feet, right? Which provides serious constraints about building. And again, I'm in my vision, my fantasy, I'm a preservationist, and I own a house built in 1829. And I look at old houses and I look at those with a vision of, how can they be restored and saved? But that sometimes, my vision, and I know it's not economically feasible, it's only sometimes in fantasy, is that houses, historic houses, the historic features are maintained while that house is modernized and blown out, and try to get an open floor plan. And how do you get an open floor plan with a house that has rooms that are 12 by 12 or 14 by 14 with narrow hallways? Well, you got to blow out a side of the house. You got to do structural things and do things like that. So it's costly. It's a labor of love. You have to have a passion for that. So I fantasize, that somebody would go in there and take off that hideous aluminum siding, vinyl siding, fill in the pool. And the other aspect is, another thing that drives me crazy about historic preservation and the knockdowns and the like is there's no attention to, sort of the topography, and they'll just flatten things out and lose sight of, how did that fit in with the whole topography? Well, that house, sort of maintains, see the flow of the topography there around the surrounding houses. You see how it was cut out to make a park, how it was cut out to, make Wachusett and build that thing there. But here's the last remaining thing. And, a developer, with vision, will approach it with that way. The 95% of the builders will look at that lot as, bulldozer, flattened piles, and it will, when they walk away, it will be level rather than being gently sloped, and fitting in with the neighbor's topography. Many builders will, like I said, will flatten it, and there'll be a definition between lots just by how the grade changes. Okay, So I don't know what your vision is, but I still think that that's a piece of restoration. Also, you know, in exploring the rules, you know, around renovations and additions. You know, I don't know if it still exists, but there used to be, you could increase the size of a house by 240%, especially on a non-conforming lot, to before you called it new construction. Because the minute you knock down that house and it becomes designated as new construction, you'll have to abide by not the, and I believe there's only probably a 10-foot setback between that house and the park fence.
Maybe
Right.
even less in some areas.
Even the, okay, well, you'll have to comply, you know, you'll have to comply with the 14 feet setback on that side. It doesn't give a lot of room, you know, for building a larger house if you have to go by those new parameters without being, you know, harsh to how it gets shoehorned in by the neighbors as well. So, but however, if you kept that foundation on that side and, you know, kept some things and kept some of the historic nature of the house and built an addition that modernized the house, and you might have some, you know, some of those loopholes to get around to keep it within the way it fit into the lot. So that's my fantasy and my vision. You know, again, it takes someone with a labor of love to like some of those carpentry details that are worthy, like the fact that, you know, that house, you know, where it fit into Needham's history in regards to just how it sat there in the lot and everything, you know, built around it. You know, so.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chip. Don.
I think it might be worth just remembering how limited the authority of the Historical Commission is. And it's actually, as Rose stated at the beginning of the meeting, there's a two-step process. First, to determine whether or not the property is of historical significance, which was done at the last full meeting of the Historical Commission. This meeting is to determine whether it is preferably preserved, which just means that it is worthy of a delay. So I just think it's a good idea to remember that we're quite limited in what we can do as a commission.
Exactly. And Gloria.
Okay, I did know the Wetheralls and had extensive talks with them when they were listing the house on the historic inventory. And I know it was a house that they were very proud of. Looking at these photos, obviously there is a considerable amount of damage. But I am also seeing a lot of original material in this house. This whole banister structure, including that nice little cutout spiral at the bottom, actually says to me somewhat earlier than 1630s, I mean 1860s. You've got moldings, you've got these really excellent peaked lintels over the doors, French doors. This is, I mean, my reading chair would be right there. You've got this lovely bay window, which you could see from the outside because it didn't get covered in siding, still has the original brackets and window structure, which probably would have at one point, you know, also been part of this. There's a lot of original material in this house. It is not for me either in the issue of my expertise, which in this matter is nil, or as our charge for the commission to say what the economics of this are, but money is going to have to be spent on the structure one way or another. You're either going to have to renovate it or you're going to have to tear it down and build something else. So it's not, so to me, that sort of washes out. The issue is money is going to have to be spent one way or another. So I don't see that as part of the argument. What I do see is a house with a good deal of preserved historic material that, apart from the damage, unless you had some evidence that, obviously I wouldn't want my children under this either. But,
Or on it.
or on it, well, is the house condemned?
I mean, I don't know what that would make it condemned. I know I'm not going on the second floor. I know you don't want to go stand under that ceiling because I don't know what, because when I think
But-
about 4 feet of water going through those floors, what happens, I don't know. I just called the restoration guys to find out, and they said it's all by case basis, and we need to examine,
They
and we
need
have
to,
a,
they would need to do an
we have a
inspection.
year
yeah.
backlog, and can it cause mold? It depends how long it stays there, and all these questions. So, but every question is answered, we have to see it.
Yeah, well,
Okay,
yeah,
you
I mean, no, that's understandable.
But
'cause
I know I don't
every
want my
damage-
daughter going
every
in
different-
there
No,
under the ceiling because I saw the rain. I was about to run down the stairs myself to shut up the water in my boots. And then I thought, no, I'm not gonna get frostbitten because it's freezing outside. And I waited for the fire department to arrive. So
No, I appreciate that it's not livable in the current condition, but I'm not convinced it's not fixable either.
no, I don't disagree with that. I never said it's not fixable. I just, the way banks operate is they take how much they think you could sell it for, and they tell you what it's worth. If that, I know
That's
that
true,
doesn't,
because
I know that doesn't apply to but you guys apply to this. I understand that's not part of the calculus. But
All right, okay. Do you have anything, Laura?
I don't.
Okay, and Dylan?
Don't.
Okay. I think that we are at the point of taking, I'm sorry, yes.
So just
Thank
have
you.
one other question about the timing of the 6 months. That's peak summer and the neighborhood is extremely small. The street is very short, so I'm having a vision of construction equipment going all day from 7 in the morning till 6 at night at prime time during the summer. Is that a consideration? I don't know who told you summertime was good, but summertime is not good.
some kids go away to camps and et cetera, and people go to the beach and they're not around on the weekends is what.
There's one child.
No, there's 2 kids right across directly neighboring us at 158 Buford, yeah. 158 Buford, that's directly the neighbor. They have 2 kids, 2 boys. Yeah.
I was saying on Wyoming.
Well, I'm just saying the neighbors, I'm talking about specifically people, they would be impacted the most, not you guys.
October.
Right, because
Trucks.
no, but I'm talking people who would be impacted directly, would be people right there with 2 boys who are doing things in the summer. I spoke to them, the couple with 2 boys. There's 2 brothers living there diagonally. did not go speak to them. And Martha and the neighbor across the street. So those are the people, because they would hear the noise the most. I didn't have a chance to knock on everybody's door. Probably should have done it to introduce myself. I understand the concern.
It's just quietest during the fall and winter when everything is shut down.
And in fact, 6 months would take us to October.
Right.
So,
That would be a good delay.
And I don't mean to, I understand.
So
I
can I
understand.
just ask a question from you guys? So the criteria for the delay right now becomes when it would be least, in the opinion, I'm kind of,
okay, the purpose of the delay is to allow time to actually make improvements so that we don't have to have demolition.
right,
Hoping you can come up with a
Hoping that you can
solution
come
to
up.
save the house as it is,
right,
so it doesn't have to be torn down. That's the purpose of the delay.
right. But the statement that 6 months would put us to October sounds like your mind has been made up already, and that would, but that's it.
It's not everything's delayed till October. It's based on the date of your submission and your request.
I only brought
I
that
think-
question up because you had mentioned at the outset that you interviewed some neighbors and they said summertime was good.
Yeah.
And that it was an eyesore. I'm just wondering where those things go.
And
Doesn't seem right.
So
We don't take in consideration
Yeah, that's not their
the
thing.
timing of the demolition. It's
It
only,
is what
it's
it
only
is.
in response to preservation.
The issue
right,
is-
so it sounds like
That's a
this-
building, that's a building department issue that, if neighbors spoke or you spoke to them, about those kind of
No, my
details.
conversation was just around, what I mentioned is people go away in the summer more, and as the gentleman mentioned, there's no kids. The kids I'm talking about
Well,
are directly
actually,
the neighbors.
the reason that I
We
mentioned
can't control
October
the
is we
timeline.
just wanted to clear up the fact that this, if we imposed a 6-month delay, it would be
Oh,
until
wow.
October, right?
And,
Yeah.
and I want to be clear that I do understand your position, but my thing is not about the sentimentality of having visited Yancy and Ward there for years. As much as I appreciated them as humans and people, that's not that. It is about, I've always felt a connection to the historical aspect of that house. So that's why I'm sitting here, and I also grew up in this town, and I see it changing drastically, and I haven't understood the role of the historical, like, what is the role, and is there any protection to save this history, because we're replacing it with things that we're losing some of the soul of the house when we lose, the soul of the town, when we lose some of these houses.
We agree.
Those are
So
topics
this is
that-
not to
topics
give you
for
a
another
hard time,
time.
but it is it's really important, and as I look, like, I'll probably be moving out of this town with the great sadness of so many things being raised and these big houses being put there, and I guess I don't have comfort, I don't have faith that the biggest house possible for the most money possible is not going to be put on that property. And all the indications are that's the intention. And so, we live on this little dead end street. There's this beautiful path to a park. There's this historical house there. And I feel like
I
it's
wanted
about
to live in
money.
that house to the path to the park and watch my kids play in that park. And I understand what you're saying. I completely understand, because I'm one of the people that was priced out. But I can't, you're saying,
It's just, there's a,
I understand. I understand. I completely understand and sympathize with you, but I mean,
We'll see what happens a year from now with sitting in that. And I guess when, and I understand that the letter goes out, that's good, whatever. There's just an intentionality that
Yeah,
seems
this
present
was
in
just
this for a long time. And
the letter went out to 3 people, apparently.
but it doesn't matter how many people, it was the letter and it was what it stated, and that's an intentionality,
Okay.
and that,
What would you
and
like
that's
to-
been happening everywhere. and I
What would you like to
understand.
see there? What would you like to
I
see
would
there?
like to see exactly what he described, something, but it is about money too, I'm not saying I don't
So
understand
how would
that.
you like for somebody like me, how would you like to accomplish that? Because people sit and say, well, I don't like this and I don't like that, but you're not walking in my shoes.
I'm not, but I didn't walk in the shoes that bought the house, knowing.
Right,
it's a
so you could have
historical
bought it. Why
house,
don't you buy the house?
Because I'm living there, I didn't need to.
Well, I understand, but
Okay, I
these,
think that
these
what we.
meetings become accusatory and as if, and
Exactly,
people
and-
are becoming like, I've been
Right.
accused of essentially causing a flood. There's something,
No, we
because I
are-
sent out a letter to introduce myself. I've been to like probably 3 people, not the whole street, didn't abide by any rules. I understand it was wrong. I was honestly trying to possibly give people and so it's like, and then the other accusation, I understand the town is changing. I understand that. And I understand we want to live sometimes with our old memories, because I still drive by my old houses. I completely understand. But
I think that what we need to do now is actually come to some conclusion. And do you have a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, move that the Needham Historical Commission find the house at 28 Wyoming Avenue, the Vincent Broadley House, built in 1864, be preferably preserved, and a 6-month demolition delay be imposed.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Don. All right, Jeff.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Dylan?
Yes.
Okay, and I am voting yes also. So we will in fact send a letter to the building department saying that there is a 6-month delay. And we wish you well.
thank you for your time.
And
The difficult part is that
And it
we-
begins,
we don't
that's,
see, we don't have plans in front of us, seeing any kind of what's the plan for the replacement, The 6-month delay is fair, you know, the commission can be flexible around
Okay.
approving things that show that there's attention to preservation, and that's been done in the past.
Oh, Thank you, Vivian, for
Thank you.
your time.
And I apologize if things got a little bit heated.
Heated means that people are passionate about the subject, which is good.
I think so.
Yes, I think so too. Anyhow, I think we are now, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, Jeff seconded, and all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.